A very good evening. It is a Sunday evening, and I have to admit that I just realized that scheduling this conversation at 4 o'clock on a Sunday evening, when most of us are probably catching a very precious weekly nap, might not have been a very good choice. But I am extremely grateful for people who have been mentors, advisors, and well wishers for not just me as a person, but Caregiver Saathi as an organization, to have made the time to join us and walk with us over the last 3 years. Today is the day that we formally complete 3 years of being a legal entity. I have to admit that in my mind, when did Caregiver Saathi start is the hardest question. I don't know. Is it the day that the idea came into being? Is it the day that I made the first plan? Is it the day that I started the website? Or is it the day that we got the registration of our trust? I suppose all of that is not so important. It is just important now that we have a date on which we were a formal organization, that we celebrate our birthday, our anniversary, and take a moment to pause and look back at how far we have come. There have been many, many difficult days of doubt, of anxiety, of not really knowing what we are doing and why, and whether it is really worth it. It is today that I would like to, in addition to almost every other day, acknowledge the support, the guidance, the hand holding, and the encouragement that we have received for some of the work that we have done. I am going to introduce the gentlemen who have walked this path with me. First up is Dr. Madhukar Shukla. Dr. Madhukar Shukla has been my professor at XLRI many, many years ago. He has seen me being rather childish, I have to say, on many occasions, especially the day that I got my first job and ran to his office looking for my very special teacher, who also happens to be his life partner. I have to be, I have to acknowledge and appreciate the many ways in which Dr. Madhukar Shukla has helped me as an individual and helped me find an organization like Caregiver Saathi that I could give expression to. Thank you. Next up is Raghu Anant Narayan. Thank you for being here, Raghu. Thank you for the many times that I have reached out to you screaming, help, help, and literally holding my hand or sometimes just being with me in silence. I believe those moments have been very, very powerful. I often acknowledge the space that I have got through Sumedhas, an organization that you founded. Also, the Learning Theatre, which was really seminal in my personal journey, where I looked at answering the question of a dharmic life and what might be a dharmic life for me as a person. I also think being able to look at leadership through the Mahabharata lens that you have guided uh, me and many others through your organizations, whether it is Tau or now Ritambara, have been very, very significant and lay the foundation for Caregiver Saathi in so many ways. Welcome and thank you. Next up is Dr. Rajiv Sareen. It's a very Dr. Rajiv Sareen is someone I found through the internet. I was looking for getting into this whole world of caregivers and healthcare, and I was wondering who is it that I could reach out to and who will help me navigate the world of terminal illnesses, caregivers, and literally I searched and found Dr. Rajiv Sareen's video on YouTube, looked up his number, coincidentally happened to find his landline number where he happened to be sitting just that day, and agreed to meet me for 15 minutes. And luckily, we had a nice hour long conversation. I hope you recollect that. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, for giving me that time that day and encouraging me and supporting me and helping me walk this path over these years. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you. Next up is Dr. Raj. Dr. Raj is the chairman of Pallium India, and there was a screening of his film, of his incredible work in palliative care at TIS many years ago, just before or just around the time that I was visualizing Caregiver Saathi. And my friend, Dr. Khushnuma Mulan Firoz, said, I must come and watch this film. I have to say that visiting TIS that day, watching that film, and being introduced to Dr. Raj really encouraged me and helped me give shape to Caregiver Saathi. Thank you, Dr. Raj, for the many ways in which you have influenced, encouraged Caregiver Saathi and me personally. Last up today, but definitely not the least, Dr. Roop Gurshani, a neurologist at Hinduja Hospital. Welcome. Dr. Roop, again, I first saw him in a panel discussion at the same screening of the film at TIS. Um, and I said to myself, okay, this is one gentleman I will have to reach out to because he's the one in Mumbai. And I am so grateful for the patient listening of the very raw and the very unformed idea that I had with you many, many years ago. And you asked me so many questions, but yet supported me despite me not having those answers at that stage. Thank you, Dr. Roop, for always being reachable and for always being there for Caregiver Saathi. Can we start with you, Dr. Madhukar Shukla?
Yeah,
Please tell us what is your association with Caregiver Saathi and how do you see this journey?
yeah. I'm. Thanks for clarifying that this is the formal third anniversary of Caregiver, because what I remember that Caregiver started almost about a year before that.
At least.
I remember first time when we had a chat on the phone and you mentioned about it. I mean, looking back, I mean, it has come a long way. But let me also share something which, where at that time I said, this is too vague an idea. This is, this somewhere in my mind, I also thought, this is one of those midlife crisis, giving back to society kind of a thing.
Most certainly.
So
Most certainly.
yeah, but then we had number of other chats, and I remember I'm very happy that Dr. Rajgopal is here, because I remember at one
Yes,
point of time I had sent a link to one of the articles about his organization. I
that's right.
think that was giving dignity to people in pain or something like that.
That's
And
right.
you said I've already got in touch with him. So actually, that was the first time when I sort of realized that Bhavna is serious. She's really doing that, and uh, so from there to now, it has come a long way. Initially, as any idea happens, it starts with I mean, that's what happens with any great ideas, that they start with some very vague rumblings in the mind, some दिमाग में कीड़ा लग जाता है. But then I think hats off to you that you continued with that. I mean, you persisted, you gave it a shape, and now it has come to a place where it is right now. So congratulations for that, and congratulations for to Caregiver Saathi for the third anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Madhukar. I have to say that given your wide experience in social entrepreneurship and the fact that you teach students of management to venture into that area, I really look up to your inputs and guidance for sometimes just grounding myself and looking at what we might do next.
Sure,
Thank
definitely.
Raghu.
I'm unmuted, yeah?
Yes.
Right. Uh, when I, I think I share your confusion, Bhavna, about when did it start?
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, I think it started when you were having conversations with me about whether to act from your heart or to act from your head, right? And I guess that has been the nature of our conversations over a period of time, right? How much do you follow the heart? What do you do? And so on. And I'm always of the opinion that when you follow the heart, huh, sooner or later things will fall in place. But I guess the whole issue is sooner or later, because that's where the resilience and so many doubts and all that come in. And I think it's very critical, that what you're doing, I think is very critical. Okay. So I've also responded more to this whole idea from my heart than I guess from my head. I don't know. Yeah. But having said that, nah, uh, I think the entire area, the entire struggle you're having will always be between what is the extent of service orientedness in people, how much of the service orientation resonates with people. Do people get caught with their purposiveness? How do you work with it? And I guess most of our conversations have been around this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's a great learning. It's been a great learning for me to listen to you, and I'm hoping it's been a great learning for you.
Indeed, indeed. I think just always going back to that question that you ask, which is in doing what I'm doing, what am I really doing, has been a huge learning for me. I have to say, I get distracted. I mean, without doubt, but it helps to go back to basics through your conversations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
all the best. Yeah, I'm sure we'll go from 3 to 30 now.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Raj.
I hope I am audible now, Bhavna. I, we had a long car ride together. I don't remember from where to where, somewhere around Mumbai.
Yes, that's right.
And that was our first meeting.
Yes.
And I learned a lot. You shared with me the story of three generations of your family. Now, we are in the same kind of business. You and I, and most people here, are in this business of relieving health related suffering, because we see that the healthcare system treats diseases and ignores suffering. We treat suffering. And because we see the suffering of patients as well as families, and both are important, we know, but the patient's problems are so much right in front, and the caregiver turns out to be the invisible patient, the voiceless patient, suffering enormously, nobody caring for that. And you were talking about those people, the family members, and generations, and the impact that it causes on the next and the subsequent generation. From that day, I'm very glad that this organization exists to do what we ourselves are unable to do. I hope you go from strength to strength. Thank you on that day for making me talk for a long time, but also allowing me the pleasure of listening to you. And I am yet to understand fully. I know I have not done much for Caregiver Saathi, but I know that I'll have a lot to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Well, I think one of the big things that we started off with was first off being present at the IAPC conference in Kochi, where we presented the voices of caregivers. And to simply present that idea at that time was a very significant step for Caregiver Saathi. So, thank you for creating that opportunity for us. And I'd like to acknowledge that. Thank you. Dr. Rajiv Sarin, how do you associate with the idea of caregiver Saathi?
So I think the whole thing started one day, as you said. I was sitting on my desk on a Saturday. Normally, I'm busy in the OPD or the wards or somewhere else. Just got a phone call, and some lady was saying that she wanted ideas and association. I said, I mean, it's just not so. Yeah, and you were very persuasive, and we agreed to meet for for a short period, 10-15 minutes. I just wanted to assess, and just to be polite, I should say that. But when on that Saturday this lady came, she seemed very persuasive. Who was a biker. Then I think the two things which really made me agree to look into it more and be part of it in whatever ways, little ways, is that the cause was very different. Everyone wants to talk about caring cancer patients, cancer this, cancer that, funding, and emotional support. We're talking about caregivers. So I had never heard of anyone making them as center stage. They were always side actors. They were in the periphery. And as a cancer doctor, I knew how much it meant, how important they are for the patient, for the doctors, for the healthcare systems. And they are nowhere in the picture. So they were just, and they were in the process, they were just sort of getting consumed. So the topic itself was very important. And just at that point of time, we had analyzed we were doing a research as part of patients who have metastatic breast cancer, bone metastasis. So otherwise, normally people look at quality of life of only the patient, but we also had a tool and we assessed the quality of life of the caregivers. And not surprisingly, they had a lot of things which were affecting their quality of life, and we could quantify, and it depended upon the patient's quality of life, so it was a direct reflection. And the well-being of a caregiver is very important for my patient well-being. So that was one thing. So the topic was this. And then, of course, I could see that you have a professional background. Although what you were talking was more out of passion and emotion and personal experience. So I was just trying to judge as to, I mean, how much she knows more than a few anecdotes or personal stories. But I knew that from whatever we talked, that you are a professional person, and whenever you will take up something, you will sooner or later get it right. So these are the two things which made me associate with it. But I had concerns, and I had major concerns, because seen so many times people come up with great fancy ideas. We'll do this, do that, and after 1 or 2 years, they just don't exist. And the reason why is that because I myself had experienced the spirit of volunteerism in India is, I shouldn't say it is absent, but it is very distorted or weak. When they have a patient, active patient, they're all involved and they'll come for support group meeting and all that. But when their thing is done, they just disappear. They are ready to donate, but donation doesn't help. So I wasn't sure. Once upon a time, when I used to treat brain tumors, so when I'd come back from England, we used to look at holistic care. When we used to discharge patient from the ward, someone will see how the patient will go back home, who will look after her, a home care visit will visit here. In the hospital, we will look after the patient equally well, but once the patient is discharged, what happens to them, we have no idea. So I started Brain Tumor Foundation thinking that in 2, 3 years' time, we will hand it over to patients. But no patient or relative really came forward to took the responsibility. So I had major concern that how will it be sustainable? How can one person, not just funding, I had serious doubts you will have a equally crazy and passionate partner about this who will take it on, and at least one or two more people. So that was my concern. I raised those concerns, but I think you didn't bother about those concerns and you went ahead and did whatever you had to do. And today we are 3 years, whatever, time doesn't matter. So all the best.
Thank you very much. I remember telling you with a little bit of arrogance, saying, ki, I can ride a motorcycle to the top of the hills. What
Yeah.
is an organization? And you said, let me caution you.
Yeah.
This is harder. This is definitely many times harder than that. And you insisted that I visit you at TMH
Yeah.
and have a feel. I
Yeah.
have to say that that was a very poignant moment for me to come to the genetic oncology ward of yours and visit TMH. Just the sheer act of coming to that hospital and experiencing the throes of people, so many of whom who are family caregivers, was tiring. And I really applaud what you do day in and day out. So thank you for making the time for Caregiver Saathi on so many occasions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Roop,
Hi. Am I audible?
very.
Okay. Congratulations, first up, Bhavna, for this milestone.
Thank you.
And obviously, I kind of echo what others have said of meeting you um, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and wondering where this was going to go, and then finding out that this is indeed leading to some good places. Since I'm a neurologist and with an interest in palliative care, my patients eventually, as I at some point I have to tell the families of the patients that I look after that for me the family is an equal responsibility. That the caregiver or the care partner to me is a person that I need to be concerned with, because without that my patient is not going to be taken care of. And so obviously for me, um, I'm privileged that you in fact included me in this kind of partnership. Thank you so much, Bhavna.
Well, I have to say that with your encouragement and the first support group that we started for ALS, and we had those meetings, have been very, very significant learning grounds and initial first steps. So I'm really grateful for the many times you have patiently heard me out as well and guided us. I think it has been very important to venture into the area of various conditions that are neurology related. That is what is personally my life experience. You know this. My father had multiple system atrophy, and you know neurological conditions do need attention as much as cancer or any other does. So I'm so grateful for your perspective. I would like to, ask each one of you to share with, as you have seen this journey, as you see the world, as you have experienced life, what do you believe that are your reasons for concern or things that we should watch out for as an organization as we build further? So, what would you caution us as an organization that is wanting to set up things and we are still, you know, trying to figure out or learn? Should I point to a person or would you? Yes, go Raghu.
Ah, that's a difficult question, Bhavna.
Yes.
Yeah, so let me just take a shot at it. See, since most of my work nowadays is just listening to people, and I'm kind of pulled back from actively looking at the market and those kind of processes. I'm going to be speaking to you largely from what I'm hearing people speak about. Yeah. And in recent times, obviously, there's been a lot of this caregiving that has come up, yeah? Partially because of COVID, partially because of so many other things happening around. And I think the primary difficulty that I see is a caregiver owning up to their own needs and to their willingness to say I need help.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be a critical challenge for you going forward, because I think there is a valorization of victimhood and valorization of being a martyr. And when I speak to many of these people and I ask them, why don't you seek help? The immediate thing is, how can I seek help?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that is a critical component which you will have to crack. Yeah, and I think it's also related to, all kinds of strange ideas that if I'm, stressed and I seek help, there is something wrong with me. We find that very often in India with, people going through mental stress, for example. And
Yes.
I don't think this stress is looked at in any way very different from that. Yeah. So any stress that a person goes through is being held up as war wounds rather than something that if I look after, I can even do my primary task of caregiving or whatever else I'm doing much more efficiently and much more effectively.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is like, to many people, I ask them, what's the point of you dying or suffering for the other person? Nah? Shouldn't you be living for the other person? Right? And then their mind goes all the way to the other extreme, which is the problem of, oh, are you saying I should give up this thing? Are you saying I should just do my own thing? Because in their mind, that is the struggle. There is a certain oppression that they're putting themselves through. They're valorizing this oppression rather than finding the middle ground where caregiving then becomes something that they can learn from. Caregiving becomes something that is not, suppressing what I would otherwise like to do. So
It's
many of these people,
16:30.
when I see them in a sense relaxing, I see them binge watching. I
Yes.
see them doing things that actually increase their stress. Yeah, so I think cracking this idea that taking care of myself so that I can offer myself better to the context is going to be a central struggle for you.
It is very interesting that you should say that. And as you were saying that, I'd like to bring in a statistic that 74% of the caregivers in India are daughters in law. And women and girls do a very significant amount of care related work. And there are gender stereotypes, and women seeking help for caregiving can be quite blasphemous. So, yes, indeed. So, what are some of the other concerns? What would you have to say, Dr. Madhukar Shukla?
Well, the concern remains the same, which I had shared with you in the very beginning, that this sphere, the caregiver Saathi,
Hmm.
caregiving is still a recognized kind of a you know, role in society, formally or informally. Formally in terms of paramedics and nursing staff and other, but informally, as you mentioned, within the family. So that is a recognized, but the very fact that caregivers need caregiving,
Hmm.
they need sorry they need care, they need to be taken care of. And what Raghu said is very relevant, that It's not just the valorization; it's also sort of a coping mechanism that uh, if I let my own feelings, my own stress, my own fatigue, my own grief get into the way, then I'll not be able to take care of the other person,
That's right.
right? So both from the point of view of the caregiver as well as from the point of view of the larger society, that here are people who also have stress, who also have grief, who also have fatigue. Fatigue people can understand, physical fatigue people can understand, but the mental fatigue, the emotional fatigue is difficult to accept and understand. So that concern, when we had discussed in the very
Yes.
beginning, I had mentioned about it. That concern, I still have that. The idea has to be recognized. One of the challenges would be that this space gets recognized as a relevant space in the social sector.
Yes.
So, and that would be a challenge.
Yes, it is. It is indeed a challenge because, like, for various reasons, right? So, caregivers don't have the time for themselves, and they don't, certainly, this gets the last, if at all, some money for this is the last allocation,
Yeah.
because you're just expected to cope with it. I'm going to hear some of the others. What do you think are the concerns for an organization like Caregiver Saathi? Dr. Raj?
Thank you, Bhavna. Concerns would be very similar to what we would have 18 years since the beginning of the organization, I think. As Raghu already said, we are confronted with major issues.
Hmm.
Patients have a right to demand care. They confront us.
Hmm.
Well, uh, the problem is when we are confronted with so much of pressing needs, we do not have the time or the leisure or the even the strength to go beyond them to look out who is there, who
Hmm.
cannot even access our services, who
Hmm.
doesn't have the voice.
Hmm.
In Caregiver Saathi, just as in Parliament, I expect we will unintentionally filter out the most needy because they don't have the voice.
Hmm.
Those who are in depression do not have the initiative to pick up the phone and call a helpline.
That's right.
They have no rights. Uh, some some women particularly suffer so much. You mentioned the daughters-in-law. I know of a woman, young woman, praying outside in the outskirts of Mumbai, praying for another male child because if she doesn't bear a son after the death of her daughter with cancer, her marriage will not last. Her mother in law is pressing the son to marry another woman because this woman bore him an unhealthy child, daughter of all things. There are all these people and they have no voice. I understand that we will not easily find the leisure to go out and look for the more vulnerable people. But in our organization during the last 1 year, especially with the pandemic, we created this system of looking out for particularly vulnerable people in terms of gender discrimination, different sexual orientation, a lot of them with physical disabilities, mental illness, at least an effort to particularly look for them and at least one medical social worker and one doctor's team being available to give them extra attention. I think from early, I wish we had started this 10 years back. I think it's an absolutely essential element of our organizations. Care, looking for the vulnerable people, particularly Bhavna. We remember talking about it in our first conversation in the car. the siblings of child patients.
That's right.
They are caregivers now, very often, but they don't have any rights themselves. Thank you, Bhavna.
I remember you saying very poignantly that the child that grows up in a house of illness does not get adequate emotional care and maybe a kiss on the cheek, and grows up without that, and that can be a very significant thing missing from a child's life. So thank you for bringing that to the light, Dr. Rajiv.
So, as I see the caregiver's role, you know, when kids are growing up, they are told that when we will be old, you will look after us. It is not just an expectation, they are told.
Yeah,
And many times you see, so sometimes it's a plan. People have time to think and plan for the caregiver's role. They're seeing their father or mother, with each passing year, they are becoming more and more old and infirm. They know that in 2, 3 years' time, I'll have to devote a lot of my time and effort to look after my dear father or my mother. So they have time. Sometimes they don't have time. Just suddenly someone has a stroke or a fracture or diagnosed with advanced stage cancer or acute psychotic breakdown, and then they just don't have time.
yeah,
And even when they have time, they are not planning for the caregiver's role.
that's
Okay,
right.
and but when it happens in an acute way, then just immediately rush to an hospital, and the hospital will look after them, then discharge them, give them few numbers. This is the number of the physiotherapist. This is the number of that. But there are a lot of things. So my for the caregiver Saathi, my challenge is what I feel the challenge would be. Someone needs guidance for caregiver's role, whether it is planned or unplanned caregiver's role. How do they know that this place caregiver Saathi has all the resources, at least guidance? They would not know. So what happens? And then even if they know, there are two type of caregivers: those who have means. Means could be money, the type of house they live, the number of people who are there with whom they can share, and those without. So, like if today you have to look after a old or a young or old person who is paralyzed, and the kind of people everyone cannot afford. Someone will come for help 12 hours, and then someone for this thing, so they have to do it themselves. So, those who don't have means, there's no other person in the house. Even if the support and guidance you give from caregivers, how will they still cope with it? So two kind of people who with some guidance they can manage to be on top of the situation and also not neglect themselves beyond a certain point. They will always neglect themselves, but not beyond a point of self-destruction. And the second is who don't have means, can just guidance or someone talking them would help. So that is the other challenge for that. So what you can do, what you I mean caregivers Sati can do to help that section of people.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Roop.
Yeah, so I don't think I have much to add to what has already been said, but I presume that as an organization going ahead, looking at individual lives and yet keeping sight of the broader picture, uh, I think that's important, and it's equally important to broad base it enough so that you can reach out to anybody who needs this kind of help and service. It's I think it's still early days, but I think you're off to a good start.
So I'll start with you again, Dr. Roop, and say that if we were to have a similar conversation, let's say 3 years down the line, and say, what is it that we wish for in 2025 that is the path that we would have covered? What is that picture? What does that look like in your mind as you look at it today?
Um, I think at least um, a service delivery organization, at least at some geographical locations, at least as a pilot project, which kind of starts moving. It's all well to talk about broad things and stuff like that. Finally, what matters is boots on the ground, rubber on the road,
Yes.
actual caring hands.
Yes.
And I think having that happen matters more than anything else.
I don't want to necessarily point to someone. Anybody who wants to come in, please feel free to come in. Uh,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
I would say in 3 years, you said
Yes.
2025. Uh,
Yes.
One that the recognition, the roles. So what comes to my mind, something like Caregiver Saathi clubs in different locations,
Mm,
not clubs or some like their palliative groups, which
yes.
Dr. Rajgopal's organization and Dr. Suresh Kumar's organization, many other organizations, which where people can reach out, they know, or they reach out. So similarly, the point, for example, what Dr. Sareen was mentioning, to prepare people for roles. So if let's say I am suddenly landed with the job of a caregiver, I know where to reach out. What,
Yes.
which may be very very specific things. Like I need counseling or I need certain very basic information.
Mm,
So one thing, if I mean, it's only a dream that after 3 years, if Caregiver Saathi has spread out and created these groups which
yes.
provide that. So that's one thing. The second thing, which I think we have discussed it many times, is about the financial sustainability of the venture.
Yes.
Because whatever I know in the field of funding and investment, this is still not in the radar of funders and investors.
Yes.
So somewhere Caregiver Saathi will, and perhaps it will not be.
Mm,
Why I'm saying is that uh, funders and investors look for very specific numbers,
yes.
and very specific impact. Now, it's very difficult to measure the impact on caregivers. I mean,
Yes.
caregivers can give an impact. Okay, we help so many patients, but and this is what the outcome was. But here, the outcome is to show the outcome is a would be a challenge. So, so perhaps Caregiver Saathi will need to look at different models of raising funds of becoming sustainable, because sooner or later it has to become financially sustainable. So that
Yes.
is also one of my concerns about Caregiver Saathi.
Indeed, indeed, it is. And there is just so much sense of crisis and emergency that we find most funding bodies fund for things that are, tangible benefit to the
Yeah.
beneficiary, and that is in crisis. We saw that in the COVID crisis as well, that a lot of money went to, buying oxygen concentrators, which was absolutely required. But in that spirit, to build infrastructure, to build resilience people, so that they can cope with
Something has happened to your network.
such idea. Um,
Yeah, so that's a challenge, because it's very difficult for funders and investors, or even for most people, to look at caregivers as beneficiaries.
yes.
There are people who are providing social benefits, so looking at them as beneficiaries is I mean, there is a block to that. So that would be one of the challenges.
So
Um,
you're yes.
So sometimes, like there's a bank of say wheelchairs or walkers or beds, and these kind of things. Because for those who have limited means, otherwise to rent an electric bed which can be reclining would cost you 6-7 thousand per month. To some of those things, it could be done, so you could have these kind of things, and one person doesn't require it, that can be moved on to the next person who needs it. So similar kind of thing, so that could be one thing, but I think the main challenge would be someone who has caregiving needs which have come up immediately. How do they know that caregiver Saathi exists? And if they reach out to you, then what specific advice are the general thing which their neighbors or themselves, after applying their mind, they would come to know? So there has to be something more than normal ordinary common sense advice. So what will that advice be? So I am asking, could there be a menu, like if suppose someone, so like a dietitian will tell you what to eat depending what's your weight, BMI, activity, whether you're diabetic or not diabetic, any illness you have, and all those things. So what is your age, your caregiver's age, fitness, how many hours of caregiving they will have to do, the financial means, where do they live, do they have lift or not. So based on that, you could come up with a menu or a suggestion as to, okay, these are your caregiver needs now, and a month from now these are the likely things you would require, and be prepared for it. So something like that.
So in 2025, we will have a menu like that. Is your
Should be
dream?
much before that.
Yes, of course.
See, you have to have a unique product.
Yes,
You have to have a unique product which is more than what people will come out with a common sense or asking someone in senior in the family.
that's right. That's right. Thank you. Um, yes. Were you saying something, Raghu? What is your vision for Caregiver
No,
Saathi?
I was appreciating what Rajiv ji was saying and agreeing with him. So if I just extend what he's saying, na, um, see, my mind goes back to a couple of struggles that you find in Indian context, which I think has a cultural bias to it. See, infrastructure providers
Mm,
and infrastructural projects and things like that in India have always been kind of taken for granted.
yes.
Yeah, and I don't, know why it is so persistent, but it is there in organizations. It is there everywhere.
Yes.
So the idea that you have to invest in people and that people are going to then become productive for you in healthy populations itself is a difficult idea.
Mm,
Typically, if you went to any organization, they would say, why should I invest in this person? You know, I want to know how he can give me some results, kind of thing.
mm,
Yeah. So this mindset is something that has to be addressed. And I don't know if in 3 years you're going to be able to address it or not. But this, I think, is one of the key areas which you will have to work with.
mm,
Yeah. To really impress upon people how the caregiver is critical in this whole chain,
yes.
right? And then you have the second issue. Na? See, AIDS got a hell of a lot of money when malnutrition and so many other issues in India kill two, three times the number of people that AIDS
Yes.
would kill. So something like caregiver Sati might not fall in the marketable idea.
Mm,
So if I donate a chair for somebody, there are new chairs coming up in sit, stand, whatever,
mm,
slightly costly, this, that, I can put my chapa out there and say donated by so and so.
yeah.
But aid, help that I give to a caregiver, how do I, in today's bad word, monetize it? Na?
Yes.
Or how do I show it off as something meaningful? And I don't even think it comes under the CSR
Yes.
benefit kind of areas, right? So all of these are advocacy areas which might have to be also focused on. So like Madhukarji was saying, it's a huge job, right?
I
And maybe you'll have to focus on certain areas. And
yes.
I'm looking at 3 years from now, something like Bombay or
Mm,
some place like that having become a showcase.
mm,
Yeah, or maybe a couple of hospitals you take and you focus on that and you've created a showcase out of that, and that can then start multiplying.
thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Raj.
Uh, no, I do not have um, much advice to give because you know so much more about than I in this particular field. I only look forward to watching your progress and learning from you.
Okay. Well, I am grateful. Dr. Roop, did you get a chance? You did tell us about your vision for Caregiver Saathi.
Yes.
I would I would like to take this moment and, in my conversation, and share with you that in my very enthusiastic conversation with Dr. Rajiv Sareen when I landed up in his office, he told me, he said, you need at least six other bhavnas like you to be able to work this if you ever want to get it somewhere. And once, while listening to conversations with gentle warriors, he was overhearing that conversation and he said to me, which is a very precious comment, he said, I think you have the right amount of madness for doing what you're doing. So I am grateful for each one of you to kind of stay with me and my madness. But I'd like to acknowledge my team. I now have a 100% women strong team, which has Nabia, which has Gayatri, which has Ria, Dishari, Vimla, and Meenakshi, six other women who are in the team. And I am grateful for an incredible amount of hard work that they have done to put together these anniversary celebrations and the many conversations that are going to come up. We have planned many conversations, workshops, sessions in the coming months where we will be looking at education, awareness, and creating the environment for caregivers so that this issue, which has been invisible or unrecognized thus far, can get the necessary light. As we bring this session to a close, I would like for you to take a moment and tell us what you would like to say as closing remarks, your wishes, blessings. What would you say? Anyone who's ready can start and others can follow.
We're
Raghu, you are
with
saying
you.
something?
We're with you, Bhavna. So as you walk, we will learn. And the more we learn, the more you think we are helping you, which is great for us. So I agree with Rajagopalji that we're going to learn a lot in this process because you're doing something new, na?
Thank you, Raghu. Thank you for walking this with me.
Exactly what Raghu has said and Dr. Raj has said that for me it has been learning because this was not an area I ever thought about.
Mm,
So every time we have conversation, we do have conversations once or twice in a month or two. So I do find new angles to look at the problem, and that is one uh, about the point which Dr. Serene had said that you have the right amount of madness. I entirely agree with you, and I think we need to have many more mad people in this world who can, you know, do things which otherwise other people think are not possible. So carry on, and we are with you. Best of luck.
thank you. Thank you, sir.
So, Bhavna, I would just like to say that keep doing whatever you are doing.
Bhavana,
Uh, Sorry. So, but only thing I would just say both caution as well as optimism. I think you will make the difference. I mean, you will make a difference to this. India is not a social, welfare state, and even in limited way, there will be a difference will be made, but a lot of work needs to be done. And I would also suggest you see that your reach increases, whereas your administrative does not increase. And think about putting some money in advertising the cause also. I mean, everyone. So why should only pan masala advertise? Okay, do the surrogate advertisement. So I think it is very important that people know about the work. They not know about you, but they should know about the work. And it takes, whether that, and you put that money as a separate from the administrative cost, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
All the best.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bhavna, as I do not have many wise things of my own to say, I'll end with this quote from Mahatma Gandhi. Recall the face of the poorest and the most helpless man or woman whom you may have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him or her. Will he or she gain anything by himself or herself? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raj.
Um, and Dr. Raj leads the way, but I think Mahatma Gandhi is always a source for quotes that are appropriate. Be the change that you wish to see in this world. I think that's true of all of us,
Hmm.
and we need to carry that through into a professional life.
So thank you for your time, and thank you for being there. Thank you for being with the organization as much as me personally. I cannot thank you enough for the many ways in which you have supported us. I look forward to your guidance and support in the coming years, not just the next 3 years, and look forward to hear from each one of you separately. Thank you very much for spending your time this Sunday afternoon.
Thank you, and all the very
Thank
best. And
All the
all the very
best.
best.
All the best, Bhavna.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye
bye.
bye.
Best wishes, Bhavna.
Thank